Welcome back to our podcast, Exposing Disney, where the most magical place on earth is actually the most corrupt.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please?
The Disney Corporation is a huge powerhouse industry that has been sweeping the entertainment world for decades. Whether we see it or not, Disney is a big part of most people's lives. Many of us grew up watching Disney Channel, Disney movies, and going on trips to Disney World or Disneyland. The Magic Kingdom is the most visited theme park in the world and is currently celebrating 50 years since opening in Florida. With the corporation's fame comes an essential need for employees to keep it running up to the magical standard that is expected. Disney World employs approximately 62,000 people, which is an astonishing number. What some people may not know now is they are whisked into the magical narrative of the parks is that Disney actually is very strict rules and regulations for their employees and those who work for the industry at large, including their stars within the network. In this podcast, we will take a deeper look into the topic of emotional labor, the impact that it has on Disney workers, and the lifelong impact the corporation has on its childhood stars. Our goal is to shed light onto what is hidden from consumers. We will begin today by speaking with a retired Disney cast member, Phil. Thanks for joining us today, Phil. Can you tell us a little about yourself and how you are familiar with the Disney Corporation?
Of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Phil, and I was a cast member at Disney theme parks. My role was to greet the visitors when they entered the park. I grew up watching Disney movies and visiting the park that I worked at, so I thought Disney would be a perfect place to work for me. I majored in Disneyology at Celebration University, therefore I would consider myself an expert on all things Disney. After getting my degree, I was hired by Disney, and I was fed up with their policies after several years of working all over their park.
It seems to be a trend that Disney employees become burnt out after several years working for the corporation. A big issue that's continually brought up is Disney's need for control. And we can see this a lot with how park employees are expected to dress and act while they're playing their role. Can you elaborate on how Disney controls their employees' personal appearance?
Yeah, Disney controls their employees like a majority of the time they're on work. They're on a very tight leash when they're on job around the park. The corporation manages what employees are allowed to wear, how they're allowed to look while they're on the job, and how they're required to act and present themselves to guests. In Disney's casting handbook, there's an extensive section about the physical appearance of Disney's cast members. They also have a very strict policy about tattoos, hair, nails, eyewear, and even underwear. There is also a whole other section about what it means to be costumed and non-costumed. Theme park workers are also not allowed to write about their work experience and the extensive employee training they must undergo. An example of how strict they can be would be when I was working at the theme park, someone had gotten a memorial tattoo on their wrist that was very small and seemingly unnoticeable. And as soon as upper management found out about the tattoo, they got fired on the spot. Shortly after this, I had realized that my job had begun to affect me outside of work, and I had to get away from that.
Wow, thanks for telling us this. This appearance guidelines seem really strict. Now, while we understand the pressure it places on workers, let's discuss how it benefits the Disney image at theme parks. How do you think Disney having these extensive guidelines about appearance can make it easier for Disney to push the acting part of the jobs?
Well, when you're playing a part, you have to look the part to play it effectively, as you would in any field of acting. Disney employees certainly have particular expectations about what a cast member should look like physically. However, there is no doubt that this makes it easier for Disney employees to lose themselves in the part that they are playing. Since they are already dressed for the part, they just have to play it. Many employees face alienation from themselves, from others, like guests, from the labor, and from the Disney product, the products Disney sells. Basically, I think these strict guidelines the company enforces and the absence of individuality that is present in the workplace does not create an enjoyable work environment.
It sounds to me like you can't freely express your individuality while you're on the job. This can be compared to the sociological concept of emotional labor. Emotional labor is when one's deep acting is bought and sold for a wage to serve the profit motive, and when one's feelings become a commodity engineered to further corporate and organizational interests. Where have you personally experienced emotional labor at the Disney parks as an employee there?
Well, a perfect example of where I remember emotional labor is at the Hollywood Studios restaurant called 50's Primetime Cafe. This particular restaurant is based on life in the 1950s. The tables are set up like a traditional 1950s kitchen, as well as old TVs next to them from the era. The waiters and waitresses greet your party and proceed to tell you all of the table rules. These rules are no electronics, no elbows on the table, etc. Many rules you would find in a household. These female cast members who work here portray themselves as mothers from the 1950s. They also wear pink and white button-up dresses that go down to the knee, as well as an apron, and the men wear button-down long sleeves and light blue dress pants. If the cast members break character or are not fully playing their part, the restaurant loses its uniqueness, and patrons of Disney World might stop going there if it wasn't for the 1950s experience.
Thank you, Mr. Phil, for speaking on your experience working as a cast member for the Disney Corporation in the theme parks. Now we are welcoming a special celebrity guest to speak about her experience with Disney in her youth. Welcome to our podcast. Could you tell our listeners who you are and how you're familiar with the Disney Corporation?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Miley Cyrus. Thanks guys, thanks. I worked for Disney since 2005, and I started when I was 13 years old until recent years when I started to focus on my music career. My character within Disney was primarily Hannah Montana, however, people were also familiar with me as Miley.
Wow, so you've definitely earned your veteran status with Disney. Do you believe that emotional labor has taken a toll on Disney's child stars? What kind of impact did it have on you personally as a child star, and a very famous one at that?
Honestly, working for Disney ruined my childhood. I am forever grateful for the following that playing the role of Hannah Montana gave me, but I would do anything to get back the opportunity to have a real childhood. I was also always under a microscope, so my every move was analyzed by fans and my employers and the media. There was no room for error. I was expected to be perfect because I was setting an example for my younger audience. I had to be happy and cheerful all the time, when in reality I was tired and overworked. The show ultimately ended because as I grew up and started to transition into a more mature sense of self, I wasn't able to keep up with the hyper-centered mentality of the show. It's really unfortunate, but speaking for myself and other big Disney stars such as my good friend Demi Lovato, there were a lot of drugs involved that came as a result of our emotional trauma from the industry. I mean, everyone knows about the major headlines of the Hannah Montana going off the deep end, twerking on live TV, and swinging on a wrecking ball. I wouldn't say that these behaviors were really true to me, but in contrast to my fake Disney personality, I wanted to break free in a drastic way, and being within those restraints for so long, I mean, I was bound to act out.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I can definitely see how playing the role of Hannah as well as Miley would have been difficult to handle outside of acting. You had to separate the Miley you portrayed on the screen and the one you were off the screen. Could you tell us more about this pressure on your identity?
Yes, absolutely. Even though my character was both Miley, who was supposedly based on my true self, and Hannah, I was always playing a part. It was definitely a paradox having to act as my true self. When you think of being yourself, you'd expect to have the liberty to feel and express your natural emotions. This was not really the case for me. Sure, there were episodes of Hannah Montana where Miley struggled with her double life, or had boy problems, or missed her mom, who throughout the series was dead. These issues were always resolved within the same episode that they started, which just is not realistic.
Absolutely. Miley, your transparency on this matter means more than you know. You have been an inspiration to many, and if it's any consolation, I am a bigger fan of the real Miley than the Disney version of Miley. So that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much. Everyone go take a listen to Attention Miley Live, out now on Spotify and Apple Music. We hope this episode of Exposing Disney, our viewers gained a bit of insight on what the Disney Corporation actually is like behind the pretty face they portray. The lasting effects Disney has on its employees and child stars is worth being analyzed and exposed. Next week, we will be interviewing the legendary Johnny Depp to gather more information on how Disney's control impacts adult actors as well. Thanks for listening, and remember, Disney is sus.
May I have your attention, please?